Good morning, May the 18th, and I've got another Life in Lockdown for you. I'm continuing with the end times, and we're looking at the book of Revelation. I'm looking at chapter 18 today, the fall of Babylon. It's difficult to separate the system from the person at the head of it. But we've looked at the two beasts in Revelation 13. We saw the first beast was the one world dictator. The second beast, the false prophet, is the Antichrist. I believe it's the Pope, head of the one world religion. Remember that the woman who sits on the beast is guiding the beast. The beast has the power, but the woman sits on the beast. She's got the reins, so she's steering the beast. There's an alliance between them. Well, the Babylon systems are a substitute. It's a counterfeit for a relationship with God. And this system is dependent. If you haven't got a relationship, you need things. So it's dependent on buildings, organisation, which means politics, I suppose, finance, and dogma. It needs all these. Well, God never told Israel to build temples and synagogues in the cities. He never told them to do that. They had to go to Jerusalem to worship God. And Jesus never told the apostles to build places of worship. Why we've built churches, I don't know. Because it was Rome, the Catholic Church, who put buildings up 400 years after Jesus died. They didn't think buildings were necessary because God doesn't dwell in buildings. So gods dwell in temples. All the Greek gods, the Hindu gods, the gods of all religions dwell in buildings. But our God now dwells in people, and therefore we don't need buildings. We're in danger of building pagan temples, especially we put religious artefacts in them, special table for communion, candles, stained glass window crosses. We're into rituals again, smells and bells. Well, the Catholic Church started to put buildings up, cathedrals, and they put gargoyles, demons, and they started to bury the dead round the church, graveyards. How ridiculous, they attract demons. And it was all to paganise and synthesise the pagan rituals with the body of believers, and it worked very well. Well, Nimrod was the king of Babylon, the first Antichrist, and he founded a city called Babel. But it was all about worship. I keep emphasising in these studies, Satan's end product is not to give us the chip, it's not to control the world's money and the world's politics. He needs those, but only so he can force worship if we're not deceived first. His aim is worship, he wants to be like God. So he built this city and a tower, steeple, a tower to reach heaven. Let's read it, Genesis 11, 2-4. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east, Babylon always goes west, it circumnavigated the world. And they found a plain in the land of Shinar and dwelt there. And they said to one another, let's make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone and slag they had for mortar. And they said, here it is, let's build a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make a name for ourselves. There's the three areas that the ethos of Babylon: to build, to have a place of worship to reach heaven, and make a name for ourselves so we're not scattered, so we're strong. Well, all denominations have done this, all Christian denominations have done this. They've said, let's make a name for ourselves, let's call ourselves Assemblies of God, Foursquare Gospel, Apostolic Church, Baptist, whatever, and it becomes a denomination. Let's make a name for ourselves. And then, of course, they start owning buildings, and of course it gives them power to consolidate finances and to control church doctrine. We're supposed to be free and think for ourselves. We shouldn't be controlled by our denomination's doctrines. We're supposed to read the Bible for ourselves. We have a personal relationship with God. It's not with our denomination. Well, the tower was for worship. That's why paganised Christianity puts buildings up with steeples on. The steeples are a phallic symbol. They're Masonic and occult. The whole high church is built on Masonic lines. Verse 8 and 9, so the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of the whole earth, and they left off to build a city. They never actually built the city and the tower. Therefore the name of it's called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the languages of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad on the face of the earth. Well, God destroyed the first Babylon, but it wasn't, well, it was a long time, I suppose 2,000 years, that's quite a sixth of history. But Babylon reformed again, and now it was strong under King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. He almost ruled the whole known world. It's interesting that God put his people in Babylon for 70 years as punishment. When God's people want the world, he doesn't send them back to the world. That's Egypt. That would be to lose the salvation, undo the redemption out of Egypt. So he puts them in the counterfeit. If you don't want the real God, you get the counterfeit. That's Babylon. The problem is when the punishment had finished and they came back to Jerusalem, they brought Babylon back with them in their hearts. They brought back synagogues, which God never told them to do. They brought the Babylonian Talmud, which is the writings of the rabbis. And that's the authority of the Jews today. The Babylonian Talmud is the highest authority, higher than the Torah, the books of Moses. Well, that's history. We're in the revival of the last Babylon, I believe, soon going to be judged by God. So let's look at the judgment of Babylon in Revelation 18, verse 1 and 2. After these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with the glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of unclean and hateful birds. I'm just going to read right through Revelation 18. I'll try and make a few comments. There's a whole month of studies. I'm trying to get it all into one little lockdown. For all nations, the whole world have drunk of the wine of her wrath. Wine gets you drunk, wine drugs you. It's a drug. And the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. The kings of the earth have an alliance. The political and the religious, there's always a alliance. And the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. So business and commerce and politics all have an alliance with this system. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, this is applicable to us today, come out of her, my people, that you're not partakers of her sins, and that you don't receive her plagues. Her sins have reached to heaven, and God's remembered her iniquities. Come out of her, my people. So God expects his people to be in Babylon in the last days. Think about that. God expects that the church will be Babylon in the last days. Now's the time to get out. Verse 6 and 7, reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her according to her works, in the cup which she is filled to her double. How much she's glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she said in her heart, I sit like a queen, and am no widow, and I'll see no sorrow. Babylon thinks she's invincible. It's been going a long time. Therefore her place shall come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord who judged her. Verse 9 and 10. And the kings of the earth, who've committed fornication and lived deliciously with her, shall bewail her and lament for her, when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of the torment, saying, Alas, alas, the great city Babylon, that mighty city, for 1 hour is thy judgment come. The kings of the earth, the leaders of the earth, will howl and weep and mourn when Babylon falls, because the alliance that they had that made them rich, that put them in power, is destroyed. And the merchants of the earth, so the bankers, the business people, they'll weep and mourn over her, for no man buys their merchandise anymore. And then it lists all the commodities. Now, there's a big long list, and it's so interesting. I can't go into it. I've written books about it, my Babylon series, 6,000 Years of Babylon. I recommend you read it because I go into much more detail. But let me read quickly. The merchandise, gold, silver, precious stones and pearls, and fine linen, purple and silk and scarlet. Those are the religious garments and the religious things. The bride of Christ has gold and silver and precious stones and pearls. This is the religious side, trading in religion. And all manner of vessels of ivory and all manner of vessels of most precious wood and brass and iron and marble, cinnamon and odours, perfumes and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil, fine flour and wheat and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and souls of men. They're trading in the souls of men. Interesting. And the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and you shall find them no more. 15. The merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for the fear of the torment, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, decked with gold and precious stones. That's the religious. This city, Rome, that we traded with, decked with all his religious garments, in 1 hour the great riches is come to naught. I recommended the book, The Vatican Billions. You should read it. Avro Manhattan. And every shipmate and all accompanying ships and sailors, as many as trade by sea, stood afar off. There's all the merchant navies. There's all the... It's just so all-comprehensive, isn't it? And they cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto this great city? And they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of the costless, for in 1 hour she's made desolate. And then we've got the cry, Rejoice over her, you heaven, verse 20, and you holy apostles and prophets, for God doth avenge you on her. O Lord, how long, holy and just, dost thou not avenge our blood? The souls under the altar crying, well, this is when he avenges it, when Babylon falls. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall that great city be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And the voice of harpers and musicians and pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more in her. That's interesting. You know, music was a part of the physical kingdom of Israel. They were very musical. David had instruments and dancers. But under the new covenant, you can't make a case for music in the churches. There's no mention of music or singers. Paul never took instruments round with him, and Israel were very musical. They had harps and sackbuts and lyres and all sorts of instruments. There's no mention in the New Testament of any music of any sort. It says making melody in your heart, not with the worship group. We've been deceived. They're neutral musical instruments, but they're not necessary to work it. We don't need them in the New Testament. The temple now is our bodies, so we sing and make melody in our heart. We don't need to go to a building and have a Christian concert, because that's what the worship is on the Sunday morning now. It's almost like an hour's concert before the meeting. We've been deceived. It's to do with Babylon. The voice of harpers, musicians, pipers, and trumpets shall be heard no more in thee. And no craftsman of whatever craft, the arts, culture. You know, it's a Roman Catholic Church that brought in choirs into cathedrals and brought culture in, art and stained glass windows. This was nothing to do with the early church. We've had it so long that the people don't even realise that it's part of Babylon. And the sound of a millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee, and the light of a candle shall shine no more in thee at all, and the voice of the bride and the bridegroom shall be heard no more in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth. And this is very applicable to today. For thy sorceries were all nations deceived. The whole world, all nations were deceived by this system of Babylon, by sorceries. Well, you need to look up the Greek word sorcery. It's pharmakia, where we get pharmacy from, drugs, the drugstore. Here's Strong's definition. and pharmakia, the use or the administration of drugs, poisoning, sorcery, magical arts, often found in connection with idolatry and fostered by it. Metaphorically, the deceptions and seductions of idolatry. If that doesn't fit the Catholic Church and the Pope, I don't know what does. My definition is enchantment with drugs. Vaccines, they're drugs. The whole world's being deceived to take drugs, to alter our state of consciousness, to worship the beast. The whole world's deceived by sorceries. Think about it. We're not just talking about recreational drugs. We're talking about prescribed drugs from the health service that's now controlled by the big pharmaceutical countries. Did you know music was a drug? Did you know entertainment is a drug? It gives us an altered state of consciousness. Be very careful. You're being drugged and you don't even realise it. Verse 24, and in her was found the blood of the prophets and the saints of all those that were slain on the earth. People estimate the Catholic Church has murdered 100 million people. I don't know how accurate that estimate is, but I think the lowest estimate is 50 million. Revelation 19, 1 and 2. And after these things I heard a great voice of much people in heaven saying, Hallelujah, salvation and glory, and honour and power unto the Lord our God, for true and righteous are his judgment, for he has judged the great whore which did corrupted the earth with a fornication, and has avenged the blood of his servants at her hand. Well, as soon as Babylon falls, Jesus can consummate the marriage to his bride. Verse 7 and 8 says, let us be glad and rejoice. So sure, this is chronological and it's in the same chapter, it carries on. It's not and I saw something else. Let us be glad and rejoice, give honour to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife has made herself ready. That's what we've got to do. This lockdown should give you a fright and alert you. You've got to get yourself ready. You're supposed to be the bride of Christ. Get rid of these spots and wrinkles. Get forgiving people who you've not forgiven. Start to work for reconciliation. All these things in your life that are spots and blemishes. And to her was granted she shall be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for the linen is the righteousness of the saints. Well, what's applicable to us? I've already read it, verse 4 and 5. Chapter 18, I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that you're not partakers of her sins, and that you don't receive her plagues. Think about what you're going to do about this enchantment with drugs of the system. Well, I suggest you start to get medication free. I suggest you start to get debt free. I suggest you start to get free of all the systems of the world that could hook you. Because if you don't, you'll bow the knee. You've been seduced. Unless you get free, you'll have been seduced and it'll trap you and you'll bow to the image of the beast when it comes and take the mark. Well, I've finished. The time's gone. I recommend the Babylon books. I'm going to put it after this, we close and go to black. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow for the next vlog. I'm really enjoying these series. Write and tell me how it's affecting you. If you want to correct me, criticise me, that's all right. We want the truth. I'm just trying to provoke you in these times. God bless you.